What's up, everybody? I'm Finn McCanty. This is my second channel where I talk about business and marketing and personal development and other stuff like that that's not really a fit for my main channel. I wanted to talk about this today. This is my zine that I did when I was like in high school up until I was like maybe 22 or something like that. And if you're not familiar with a zine, or fanzine as I call it, it's basically a little DIY magazine. So like this is, I don't know, 30 pages or something like that, like photocopied stuff. And it's basically a DIY magazine in the same sense as bands or people started like DIY labels and venues and booked their own tours, because you know, this is how all in the 80s and 90s, I think people still do zines, but now they're maybe more of like an art project. In the 80s and 90s, this is how a band or a label would spread their message. They would advertise or do interviews or whatever. People would do zines. Because back then, you know, there's no kind of mainstream media that was gonna cover Black Flag or Minor Threat back in the 80s, or like Earth Crisis in the 90s, right? Like Rolling Stone or Spin are not gonna talk about those bands. Yes, I'm aware that CNN did that Earth Crisis thing, but you get my point. There was nobody that was going to cover like underground hardcore, so we had to do it ourselves. And so I started doing this zine in like 93 or 94, I think. It was in like 8th or 9th grade. I just said, well, nobody else is writing about the bands that I like, so I'm going to do it. Kind of the same. It's really not so different than a YouTube channel, right? So that's what I started doing. And this one is actually from like 99. I don't have copies of the ones that I did from like 93, 94. Thank God, because they were horrible, because I was 14 or 15 when I did them. They're awful. But anyway, this one, I'll just show you what's in this one. So cover is this band called Nitro, and had some pictures, some graffiti pictures in here. A lot of graffiti pictures in here, because I was really into graffiti at the time. Made fun of the Locust. An interview with the death metal band Deeds of Flesh, if any of you guys are into them. Let's see, some more graffiti pictures. Picture of Jessica Alba, because I guess I had a crush on her at the time, maybe. Some record reviews. And again, like, so this, I'm reviewing like, what did I review in here? Pig Destroyer, Homegrown, Strung Out, Spaz, Game Face, Candiria, Disgorge, Hate Eternal. You know, there's no other, the only people writing about those bands at the time were like zines like this, right? Like that's the way that you got attention for your message. The same now as you would use social media. This is how you would get attention for that message back then. Lots more graffiti pictures. I was very into graffiti back then. Interview with Downset. An interview with Chris from Despise You about his label Pessimizer, or maybe it was about Despise You. No, it was about Pessimizer, about his label. Fall Silent interview, some stuff about video games, about Super Robot Wars and some like Super Famicom games. Interview with this band called Everything Went Black, which was a couple of the guys from Himsa. It was their band before Himsa. An interview with Assuck. I forgot that I did this. Assuck, the grindcore band from the 90s. And yeah, and then some back cover here of Ken and Ryu and Chun-Li from Pocket Fighter. So yeah, pretty much always been writing about, been talking about the same dumb shit for 25 years. Over the years that I did zines, I interviewed like a ton of bands that I loved, and it was so cool to me that I could just like reach out and contact these people. So I interviewed like Dillinger Escape Plan, Earth Crisis, Dystopia, Capitalist Casualties, Apartment 213. Like some of these people that I still have contact with today are people that I interviewed like 20 plus years ago for one of my zines. Like I now live down the street from Dimitri, the original singer of Dillinger Escape Plan. I saw him at Starbucks a couple weeks ago. And the reason I know Dimitri is because I interviewed him for this fucking zine in like 2000 when he was still in Dillinger. So how wild is that? Like to me, that is such a cool, special part of hardcore that I met this guy 20 years ago to interview him for a zine, and now he lives down the street from me and we say hi to each other at Starbucks. Like what a cool, awesome, small world. And it's all because of this. And like I said, in hindsight, although I didn't realize that I was learning how to run and operate a business back then, that's exactly what I was doing. So you think about what is a business? It's like marketing, operations, finance, and accounting, like all these functions. So the first thing I needed to do was I needed to actually create the content. So I learned how to do that on the computer. I learned how to reach out to bands and labels and stuff like that. So how did I interview Fall Silent, for example? Well, I wrote them a letter because back then that's how you communicated with people. Like I had their CD, and on the inside of the CD there was like a PO box where you would write them a letter. And so I wrote them a letter and said, "Hey, Levi Watson, I really like your band. Would you like to do an interview for my zine? Here's a copy of it so you know what it's like." And then a couple weeks later I would get an interview or a letter from him that said, "Yeah, sure, sounds fun. Here's my phone number." And then I would call him and we would record the interview, and then I would transcribe it, and then I would type it up and put it in here. So I learned how to reach out to people like that. I learned the technical skills of how to actually create a publication like this. And then I had to figure out how to get it printed. So I worked at print shops at the time, so I knew how to do printing, but I had to come up with the money for it, right? Because, printing is not cheap. I think these cost me maybe $1 or $1.50 each or something to print. And when you're 19, coming up with, $600 or $900 or whatever I think it was 19 when I did this one. When you're that age, coming up with $600 or $900 to print a bunch of zines is, that's a lot of money to most 19-year-olds, I think. So I had to the finance part. So saved up money from my job to pay for it. And then the marketing part. Well, I have boxes of these zines. How am I going to sell them? Especially back then, before the internet. Well, the way that I did it, and the way that most people did it is, so I would write letters to people. The same now as you would like DM people on Instagram, you would just write letters to people back then. So in the letters, I would make these little flyers for my zine, and I would include like 10 of them in every letter that I sent out and say, "Hey, please share these flyers with other people." Pretty much the same thing as like spamming people with hashtags and comments and stuff. And so when you would get a letter from somebody, in that letter, there would be like, 10 different ads for zines and records and stuff like that in the letter. And so you would spread it virally like that. I would also send this to get reviewed. There were bigger zines like Heart Attack and Maximum Rock and Roll that would review zines. And so I would send my zine to them to review it every time that it would get reviewed in one of their zines. So just like I have this, I had this record review section in here, wherever it is, other like this. So there would be zine reviews in other zines. And every time my zine got reviewed in one of these other bigger zines, I would see a bunch of orders come in over the next month. And so that's how, and from all over the world. And so that's the marketing part. And then the operations part, I had to figure out how to fulfill all these orders because, unlike a digital product where once it's, if you sell something in Shopify, they click the buy button and then just automatically it arrives in their inbox. I had to actually go mail these things out. So I would get cash in the mail, like actual dollar bills in the mail from Finland or Michigan or Ireland or whatever. And then I would have to actually put one of these in an envelope, address it, and then mark, I would have to make sure that I would gather all the orders that I had, and then I would have to like go through all of them and make sure that I had fulfilled the thing and send it out. So it's like fulfillment. And then sometimes I would forget, I'd make a mistake or lose an order or something, and maybe I'd get an angry letter that's like, "Hey, what the fuck? I sent you money a month ago. I never got my zine. What the fuck?" And so then I would have to resolve that. That's like customer support, right? And, all the stuff that I do now, that's all stuff that I learned from doing this. And when I think about it, like if you told me now you have to sell 2,000 copies of this and you can't use the internet, I'd be like, fuck, how do you do that? Like, so in reality, the thing that I did when I was in high school is in some ways harder than the thing I do now because we have the internet now. Like you have everything you need. Like there are no barriers anymore to creating your business to spreading your message. Like, it's all there for you. You can shoot a video with your phone. You can put it on YouTube and for free. You can share it on Instagram and Facebook for free. Like, all that stuff is free. Whereas I had to come up with $900 to print these, when I was in high school. It's just, and it was, I mean, a lot of people didn't even have computers. Like, when I first started doing zines in 93, 94, a lot of these were handwritten. People would like do cut and paste layouts, whereas I did mine, again, this is later, I did mine on computers because I knew how to do it, and I was like, I did like the newspaper in high school, so I knew how to do that. But everything is so much easier than it was back then. And I'm not saying this to be like the old man saying, you kids have it so easy, or maybe I'm doing that, I don't know. But you do have it easier now. That's just a fact. And so I guess that's kind of the takeaway for me is, first, understand that doing something creative is a business, whether you think of it that way or not. Like, I didn't think of it that way when I was 16, but like I said, I was doing like finance and marketing and operations and customer support and business development by reaching out to these bands and labels and stuff like that. Labels would send me albums that I would review, and then I would have to send them a copy of the zine to say, hey, thank you so much for sending me the CD. Here's a review of it, so that then you'll send me the next one. So all that stuff, like, whether you think of it as a business or not, it is. And in my opinion, you should treat it like one, which doesn't mean I think there's an idea among a lot of people that like business and creativity are at odds, and I don't think they are. I think they work together. I think if you do a good job of running your business, it frees you up to focus on the creative part. And if you do a good job of the creative part, then you have a great product and it's easier to run the business. So to me, they work together. I just look at them as two parts of the same thing. So yeah, I don't know. That was just a cool thing I found when I was going through some shit. Thought you guys might like to hear about it. Let me know what you think in the comments. And if, I don't know, tell me, I know there's a few of you people out there that are interested in zines. So if you're one of those people, let me know what's going on with zines these days, because I would love to hear about it. So yeah, hope that's helpful, and I will see you next time.